I have long thought that what is missing from basic education is a course in comparative religion. What an antidote to indoctrination this would be. To view the world for how it really is instead of just from our myopic little tiny culture, time, and place. To see that there's nothing special about what the people around you believe compared to what everyone else throughout all of time has believed. And if I was designing a course like this, I would start with the introduction of Jainism, or some will pronounce it Jainism. This seems to be the atheists' favorite religion, and for good reason. In fact, the first time I heard of it was a very long time ago from Sam Harris. Check out this amazing quick clip.
The crazier you get as a Jain, the less we have to worry about you. They are paralyzed by their pacifism. Jain extremists they can't take their eyes off the ground when they walk lest they step on an ant. Notice, the problem is not religious extremism. Extremism is not a problem if your core beliefs are truly nonviolent.
I love those points. And again, I think this is why so many atheists like Jainism, is because it is proof that we don't hate religion, that we're not trying to control what people believe. Believe what you want, just do no harm. And so today I want to introduce you to Jainism. Our agenda for today will be this: a high-level overview, what it is, where it started, who are the main players, what is the time frame. I want to talk about their rejection of a creator god. Then we'll look at the central tenets of Jain philosophy. And that's what I love about this, is it is more akin to a philosophy than a religion. We'll look at its own canonical text and its leaders, or better put, scholars. And then at the end, I want to do a quick comparison between Jainism and the Abrahamic religions. I think you'll find that very interesting. So let's dive in. Point one here. What is Jainism? Jainism is one of the most ancient and enduring religious traditions in India, where it is still practiced today. I think there are around 5 or 6 million adherents. It's similar to Judaism in that it's kind of hard to date. Just like we have the exile period where most of the writings started to come together from the oral traditions for Judaism, it was around the 6th century BCE when Jainism kind of got locked in, although both claim roots that go much, much further back. But in that more recent past, Jainism was a reaction, a counterpoint to the ritualistic and hierarchical practices of Vedic Hinduism. Its origins are tied to the broader Shramana tradition, a collection of ascetic and philosophical movements that sought freedom through renunciation and self-discipline. Now, this 6th century BCE in India looked way different than what was happening in the Middle East in the 6th century BCE. This time period was referred to as the second urbanization, where you had a flourishing in artistry and trade, in the construction of cities, and in philosophical discourse. And this was the sweet spot for Jainism to thrive. It offered these people at the time a vision of, again, self-reliance, ethical conduct, and spiritual liberation, unlike the Vedic tradition, which relied on these sacrificial rituals and priestly class. Jainism is claimed to be eternal. This is something that is discovered and rediscovered and revitalized. So in that way, it doesn't have a founding, at least according to its own tradition, but there are 24 very important people, not gods. These are called Tirthankaras, and we'll be speaking about the most recent and the final Tirthankaras, which is the 24th Mahavira. The 23 that come before him are more of legend, but it does seem like we have this actual figure around this time period that was the last to attain enlightenment, to be the final Tirthankara for this age. And I love this. They're not gods. They are simply exemplary human beings. How cool if every religion did this? What if Jesus could have just been a wonderful ethical philosopher? In fact, most of his teachings that are just ethical and philosophic are pretty good. It's only when he brings in the kingdom of God and the judgment of hell and all of these other things that his teaching can start to go off the rails. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but you understand the point I'm trying to make. For a religious foundation that says, hey, there's this eternal truth, and there are some that have done well at uncovering it, and not just uncovering it, but living it out and showing us its utility and its practicality. They are not our gods. They are our examples. Ooh, I just love that so much. One of the last things that's important in this overview is that it is not a monolithic tradition religion. Over time, it split into 2 major sects, the Shvetambara and the Digambara. And I'll just use the sky-clad and white-clad, which is what they mean moving forward. So this division happened around the 1st century BCE, and mainly just around differences differences when it comes to aesthetic practices, attire, and of course, scriptural interpretation. This is not a perfect religion, though it is a nice one to point to. It is man-made, like everything else, and that's going to lead to a lot of the same issues. Luckily, its core tenets, which we're about to get to, are not nearly as disastrous. That's the other thing. Yes, they still believe in gods. They still have spiritual texts. I do not believe in Jainism. I like it as a philosophy, but I do not believe in it as a religion. Maybe an important distinction to make here. So, the sky-clad group was the strict group. That's really all you need to know. Its monks had to be nude as a symbol of renunciation. They unfortunately believe that women cannot attain liberation in their current form, but they can be reborn as men and then achieve it. Just extra steps. Still sad, a product of their time and place. And they also believe that Mahavira's teachings were lost and need to be reconstructed. Then you have the white-clad group. Think of this as the progressives. Monks and nuns can now wear simple white robes. Women can achieve mashka. And they believe that the original teachings of Mahavira were preserved in the Agamas, which is their canonical text. So let's move on from this. Let's get into point 2, the rejection of a creator god. And I'm going to be a bit quicker here. 3 subpoints. 1, the universe is self-existing. There is no beginning and no end, thus no need for a creator. The cosmos is governed by these natural forces and cycles of time, rebirths of universes, if you will. This is something that I love. As an atheist, do you not get tired of hearing from Christian apologists how we believe that something came from nothing? Don't they know there's even other religions that believe that the universe is eternal, or that it is a reoccurring state of things, an exchanging of matter and energy? Not that anybody knows, but to say that we have to know it was created is ridiculous. And then to think that that argument gets you to Jesus Christ, further ridiculousness. Our second small point is that gods exist, but they are not supreme. How nice. There are no omnipotent gods in Jainism. Their deities, which are called Devas, are simply seen as advanced souls. These souls inhabit a higher realm, but they're still bound by karma and samsara, the cycle of birth and death. So again, not omnipotent, and they are not involved in the governance or creation of the world. So the third point then that follows is that human agency is central. The responsibility for liberation is solely on you, on the individual. Liberation, or the word that I used earlier, mashka, is achieved through self-effort, not divine grace or intervention. And this is where many people in the Abrahamic traditions will say, look at this, you just want to do it yourself. In fact, it's one of their main claims to fame is that theirs is the only religion where it is not about what you do, but about what God does. And I think it's such a weird brag. I'm sorry, I'm getting more into that comparative part than I want to be doing in this section. But that idea of total responsibility on the self, I think is so much more beautiful and useful than I'm wicked and terrible and I need a scapegoat. And thank goodness that this horrific God of wrath, if I do and believe and say the right things, will give me a pass because of the child sacrifice he performed on his only son. But keeping a steady pace here, let's move on to point 3, the central tenets of Jainism. And I have just 4 for you. Ahimsa, non-violence. Going back to the Sam Harris clip, isn't that amazing? Isn't it revolutionary to have this be at the forefront of your religious belief? You know what can never be used to get a big group of people to do something like the Crusades or the Inquisition or the witch trials? Jainism. The Nazis didn't have some Jainism quote on their belt. They had Gott mit uns, meaning God with us, the Abrahamic God. And you know what else is absolutely incredible to see so early in another religion is that ahimsa goes beyond the physical. It includes mental and emotional harm, a true caring for all creatures in all ways. If you have to err somewhere, err on that side as a religion. Like Sam suggests, you can be a fundamentalist, you can be the craziest, most devout Jainist ever, and it's still going to be wonderful for the world. The second point, though, is karma. The Jainist interpretation of karma is different than some of the Vedic traditions, and it is seen as itself a subtle form of matter that binds to the soul due to one's actions. So again, still religious in nature, they believe in a soul, they believe in gods in general, but still so very different. So liberation or maska involves purging these particular particles. I'm sure this can be used and abused like many other principles, but again, if we had to choose where to err in religion, I like this. When I do a bad deed, this subtle matter is infusing into my soul, and I want to keep my soul clean so I can achieve liberation. Again, huge oversimplification here. And how do I achieve that? By taking the responsibility on myself to rise up to a higher standard, to live well, to be disciplined. Pros and cons, but still, that's the description for you. The third principle, and forgive my butchering here, Anekandavada, a multiplicity of perspectives. This principle might be my favorite, although it's hard to argue with do no harm, but it promotes intellectual humility, recognizing that no single person can capture the entirety of truth. That A makes it communal, makes you dependent off of other people, makes you open to new information, and keeps you humble. I love this principle. And 4 is simple because it kind of follows the rest. It's just the asceticism and self-control. Detach from worldly desires. Accumulate minimal karma. Can this be taken too far? Yeah, probably. I think it can open one up to some negative consequences similar to some of Jesus's teachings that were around this same concept. The deny yourself. The be in the world but not of the world. The constant turning of the other cheek. So not giving this entirely a pass, but insofar as it is continued to be examined through the text of this religion, it doesn't reveal itself as harshly. It is not suffering for suffering's sake to make some other deity happy. It is understanding that this simplicity of living and this true care for everything else around you will also benefit you as well. I think that, again, I say this all the time, motives matter, and it's a pretty distinct difference there. So moving on to point 4 very quickly here, the text and the scholars. There's 2 main canonical texts that I'll point you to. The Tattvarata Sutra, written by Umsawati, this is 2nd to 5th century CE. It's the only Jain text recognized by both the sky-clad and white-clad, and it succinctly describes the path to Jain liberation. Souls are the master of their own destiny, and the influx of karmic matter is due to activity, thus its cessation is through self-restraint and discipline. 2 quick quotes just to give you an idea of what this text is about. And then you have the Akaranga Sutra. This is the one that is attributed to Mahavira. That's the one that really lays out the principles of nonviolence and asceticism. A quote from this is, "All breathing, existing, living beings should not be slain, nor treated with violence, nor abused, nor tormented, nor driven away." And in terms of scholars, I'll give you 2. Again, the Tirthankara would not count as scholars. These are the enlightened beings. Haribhadra from the 8th century is of important note, known for his works on the logic and the philosophy around Jainism, and his main emphasis was on that multiplicity of views, that intellectual humility. And then Himankandra in the 11th century was a polymath who authored works on grammar and philosophy and ethics. He synthesized the Jain practices into his Yoga Shastra. And a quote from him is that self-restraint is at the root of all virtues and the gateway to liberation. I like this idea that self-restraint being at the root of anything that is good. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And so let's move into our final point here, a comparison quickly between Jainism and the Abrahamic religions. First and most obvious is the concept of God. Jainism rejects a creator God. The Abrahamics endorse that view, mandate that view even. 2 would be the view of the universe. In Jainism, the universe is eternal and without end, just cycling through time and operating under natural laws. We all know the Abrahamics have a created universe, a beginning. That's why they have to argue that their God is outside of space and time, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever and is special pleading to just stop right there. Our third point might be around the difference between salvation versus liberation. Again, in Jainism, liberation, moksha, is achieved through self-restraint, non-violence, and the eradication of karma. No divine grace, individual effort is paramount. But we all know how the Abrahamics believe, and that's even hard to say because we've got the 3 main groups there between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and they cannot agree with each other, even though they stem off the same God. But salvation comes through, I guess we can't even be clear there. Faith in God, good works, simply belief, it depends. But either way, it is only because God bestows to you this grace after whatever preconditions you have had to meet, and it often involves a personal relationship with God and with the essence of you being the least important part of it all. For 4, let's look at ethics and morality. In Jainism, the ethical behavior is rooted around purging karma, which can be best done through simply reducing harm. Now, there are some things in the Abrahamics about reducing harm, about loving each other, but the ultimate ethic is to love, obey, and worship God, and then follow what God says, which is open to so much interpretation, and by his own example can be oftentimes horrendous, and that's why we see people doing absolutely awful things throughout all of history and in modern times based off these gods, Yahweh and Allah. Again, you will not find that in Jainism. One is about reducing harm, the other is about obeying a divine figure. I think that is a pretty simple explanation. What about the role of ritual? In Jainism, the rituals are that of purification and meditation, and in terms of worship, when it happens at all, it's directed at the Tirthankaras, not in a "we are so lowly, won't you please not send us to hell," but in a "thank you for your example" kind of way. The Abrahamic rituals will include things like prayer and worship. It is a worship that is more slave-based, not just trying to be pedantic here. You are slaves to Christ, you are slaves to righteousness, you are not worthy. You're not just exalting this higher being for being higher and a good example, you're exalting him because he demands it, because his glory requires it. And prayer and fasting and worship are the nicer versions of the rituals. Luckily, most have been done away with when it comes to the sacrifice of innocent things, whether it be animals or people. Number 6 is the sacred text. In Jainism, you have the Agamas and the Tattvartha Sutra. In the Abrahamics, Judaism has the Hebrew Bible, Christianity has the Bible, Old and New Testament, and Islam has the Quran. In Jainism, the scriptures are for philosophical teaching, and in the Abrahamics, to put it simply, it might be something like conveying divine revelation and moral law. The concept of the afterlife is number 7. Jainism believes in reincarnation based off of karma. Liberation ends that cycle of samsara, birth and death, leading to eternal bliss in a state free from the material world. Some might consider that heaven. And just like the concept of heaven in the Abrahamics, it is kind of vague. And for the afterlife, though there are some differences between the three Abrahamics, you have the concepts of heaven and hell, eternal torment, and eternal paradise. Again, depending on which one, you can get into some other unique concepts like annihilation or purgatory, limbo, etc., but pretty simple comparison there. 8, as its own point, is that of nonviolence. Jainisms believe in it and promote it, and the Abrahamics do not. In fact, they straight up endorse it and encourage it when it serves itself. But Brandon, what about the New Testament? Turn the other cheek. Isn't that nonviolent? Yes, to a certain extent it is, but you also have this exact same philosophical figure of Jesus saying to sell your cloaks to buy swords, and that he did not come to bring peace but division and a sword. The final picture we have of Jesus is out on a battlefield, soaked in blood with a sword coming out of his mouth. And I don't know about you, but for a person who claims to be one with the Father, and the Father is the one who condemns the soul to hell, I don't think that's quite advocating for nonviolence in the same way that Jainism is. What about evangelizing or proselytizing? Jainism says do not seek converts. What a statement. It says instead to focus on individual practices. Don't spread it, be it. What a concept. And yes, that's why there's only 5 million of them, where we have 2.3 billion Christians and 1.9 billion Muslims. And when it comes to the Jewish faith, I think they're around 16 million, so still triple the Jains. But I'd much rather have a lot less adherents who actually believe it and live it out than focus on spreading it at any cost. And there have been some horrific costs, and we just covered evangelism in my episode on Penn Jillette, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. And my last point of comparison, and we'll wrap up the video here, is the view on human nature. In Jainism, humans have infinite potential. Truly, think about it. That is a pretty cool idea. But yes, they're weighed down by karma. In their view, a physical reality of what happens to the soul because of how we act, not how our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother acted in the Garden of Eden. But the Abrahamics believe we are inherently broken, sinful, and worthless, even while we were still in the womb, before we had any agency or action at all. And this is what I mean. Think about this when I'm talking about comparative religion as a whole. When you raise and indoctrinate children into believing in the concept of original sin, their soul being mucked up, their complete dependency on a higher being who is perfect, this is all they know, and they digest it no problem. And I think it seeps into their psyche and has very negative consequences. In fact, I know it does. I've covered it as much and I've shown the studies. Now, again, I'm not saying Jainism is perfect, but at least they believe that those scuffs on your soul are little bits of physical matter, which I like bringing it into the material world, even if it is still referencing a soul. And it's because of what you do. And then because it's something you can do, there's also something you can do to fix it. It gives agency back to humans, even for a religion, which is pretty darn profound. So that's Jainism. I am so curious to hear what you think about it. I'm not saying it's real, and I'm not saying that it's perfect. And if I had to snap my fingers because we have to keep religion, I would choose Jainism for everyone in a heartbeat. The more that you learn about the rest of the world and their history and their culture and their belief systems, you might be shocked how unfortunate it is that the religion that has been so dominant for so long now has unfortunately been these ones based around the Abrahamic God. I'm on a work trip right now as you see this. I don't know if I'll be able to comment or if I'm going to have time yet to film the Sunday video. But at some point in the near future, there will be another video, and I hope to see you there. And until then, keep thinking. I'd like to personally thank all my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Alexander, Ann, Boris, Eric, GVI, Joe, Kitboga, Perry, Rachel, Rokkit, Shawn, and Tom; my Humanist heroes, James, Jared, Christy, and Thronis; my Atheist advocates, Caleb, Carla, David, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Lisa, Paul, Sparky, Thomas, and Todd, with a special shout out to all of my secular scholars and free thinkers, and also wanted to acknowledge all of my skeptics and rationalists who are not on the screen. Because of your combined generosity, we're able to help people who are doubting, deconstructing, or deconverting. If you haven't yet, would you please consider joining these fine people?